So I warn all the decision makers in the Middle East, Europe and the United States, as well as all the countries in the region, including Iran's neighbors, which are the primary targets of the regime, that the final moments have arrived. So, if they do not want to witness the spread of war and bloodshed in the region, there is no other option but to overthrow this regime. Seven. The decade-long experience has demonstrated that appeasing the Velayat Faqih regime is to walk along a failed path. It was this destructive policy that led to disarming and laying siege on the People's Mujahideen and handing over the security of Camp Ashraf to the Iraqis, thereby delaying the mullah's overthrow. The path to freedom is indeed the third option, which is neither appeasement nor war, but the overthrow of the ruling theocracy by the Iranian people and resistance. This option will give fruit through combatant anti-regime forces, the resistance cells in Iran, and the forces of the democratic revolution of the Iranian people. Dear compatriots, in attacking Camp Liberty last week, and on the day that the results of sham election were announced, resulting in the martyrdom of two mujahids, Kulsum Sarahati and Javad Naqashan, the regime sought to maintain its fragile balance against the main resistance force. Today, I want to ask the world community, in particular the United Nations and US government, why did they not act to prevent the crime? This massacre was quite predictable and could have been averted. The regime's first missile attack on Liberty Prison on February 9th, which left 8 residents dead, made it absolutely clear that the Liberty is completely unsafe. Everyone realized that the forcible evacuation of Ashrafis facilitated through the deceptive tactics of the UN Special Representative to Iraq was in truth relocating them to a killing field. At the same time, the natural expectation was that the UN and the US would quickly resolve the security issue because they had committed themselves to the protection of the Mujahideen in Liberty. This was especially the case because Khamenei's agents were publicly threatening another attack, and the Iraqi government had announced explicitly that it cannot ensure the safety of Liberty. Moreover, the US Embassy in Baghdad had predicted that the attack will be repeated. So, everyone knew that another attack was in the offing, but they did not take even the minimum required security measures. In the 4 months since, the Iranian resistance warned the relevant authorities hundreds of times. I personally and repeatedly wrote to President Obama, the UN Secretary General, the UN High Commissioner for Refugees, the US Secretary of State, and other officials, calling them to prevent the next massacre. We wrote that the residents of Liberty are vulnerable to any attack. We said that there are no shelters in Liberty, so allow the residents to bring inside the protective T-walls currently outside the walls of the camp, and to transfer their personal protective gear, such as helmets and vests, from Ashraf, and allow them to return to the relatively safer Ashraf, from where they could be relocated to other countries. But the reality is that during this period, UNAMI could have easily brought the protective gear for the residents. The US Embassy could have easily secured the transfer of the T-walls inside the Liberty. The UN Secretary General and the US government could have paved the way for the return of the residents from Liberty to Ashraf. But in the 4 months since the attack, they stood by and did nothing. Instead, UN Special Representative for Iraq, Martin Kobler, justified the Iraqi government's turning Liberty into a prison, and through a widespread demonization concocted false reports, he laid the blame squarely on the residents themselves. It also blamed the Iranian resistance for the failure of the resettlement process to third countries. They kept repeating this nonsense over and over in a bid to overshadow the issue of Liberty's lack of security. It is now time for them to be held accountable for the blood that was spilled, for the lives that were lost. Ignoring a preventable crime is no longer simply appeasement, cowardice, or passivity. It is complicity in criminal activity, and those complicit must be prosecuted. It is regrettable indeed that the UN and the US are insisting that thousands of residents remain under the barrage of the clerical regime's missiles and rely on hollow promises and piecemeal relocation to third countries, not knowing how long that would take. For the past 3 years, we have knocked on every door to relocate Ashrafis to other countries. We have said time and time again that we would pay for all expenses. But 16 months after relocation from Ashraf to Liberty, only dozens have been transferred to Albania through our own efforts and expense, while tolerating pressures. 8 have gone elsewhere. This is while 210 were supposed to be resettled in Albania by the end of April. Therefore, now that you cannot implement the resettlement plan, you have no right to pay for this failure with the blood of the Iranian people's children. Open the doors of liberty and let the Mujahideen return to Ashraf right now. Yes, right now.